The sound hit like a thunderclap, rattling my windows. Crunch! And I bolted outside to see it again. My mailbox smashed flat, its post twisted like a snapped twig, dangling helplessly from the base as if a tank had rolled through. But it wasn't a tank. It was a gleaming black Cadillac SUV, its tires still half buried in the gravel shoulder. Karen Prescott stood beside it, hands planted on her hips, radiating smug satisfaction. "You need to move that thing," she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's too close to the road." "It's on my land," I shot back, my coffee mug trembling in my grip. "Well, I've told the HOA. You'll be hearing from us," she retorted. That's when my patience snapped. This was the third time this year, and I knew it wasn't an accident. I didn't say a word, just glared at the splintered wood, the shattered mailbox, and her self-satisfied smirk. She had no clue what was brewing, because this time I was installing a mailbox she wouldn't see coming, and when she hit it, her precious SUV wouldn't be the only thing bending out of shape. But let me rewind to where this madness kicked off. I'm Jake Morrison, running a small cattle ranch just outside Ashbrook, Texas. A peaceful patch of open skies, grazing horses, good neighbors, and just enough space between homes to breathe. That tranquility shattered the day Karen Prescott took the helm as our new HOA president. Sure, some HOAs keep things tidy, mowing lawns, painting fences, but ours, it turned into a mini dictatorship with Karen calling the shots. She and her husband Rich, a retired real estate tycoon, rolled in, snatched up the old Raymond property, threw up iron gates, and dotted every corner with security cameras. It didn't take long for Karen to claw her way to HOA president, and she hit the ground running, putting her... And which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with your HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Nose in everyone's business. At first, it was little things, notes about my barns, paint complaints about my goats making too much noise during breeding season. Then she moved on to where I parked my truck. She said it looked too commercial and demanded I keep it hidden behind the barn. I tried to stay calm. I was raised better than to fight every battle. My mama used to say, "Pick your fights. Jake, some fires burn themselves out." But Karen was gasoline in human form, always finding something to ignite. The mailbox trouble started last spring. It was a regular Monday morning when I walked out to collect my mail and found the post cracked in two, the box lying upside down. In a puddle, I checked my camera footage, and sure enough, Karen's SUV swerved off the edge, clipped it. I figured maybe it was an accident. I rebuilt the post, replaced the box, and let it slide. 2 weeks later, same thing. This time, I knocked on her door, trying to be neighborly. Rich answered in his bathrobe, holding a glass of juice, like he just rolled out of a golf magazine. "She's not home," he said, "but I'll tell her." He didn't. 2 days later, I got a letter from the HOA telling me my mailbox violated community standards and that I needed to install one of their approved designs. The design looked like something out of a city neighborhood plastic. Tiny and definitely not strong enough to handle our windy Texas gusts, much less mail theft. Still, I installed it, and a month later, Karen hid it again this time. I had footage, crystal clear. I took it to the HOA office. Accidents happen, she shrugged when I showed the clip. But your mailbox is just in a bad spot. You really should think about relocating it to where I asked Mars. That earned me a warning letter. She claimed I'd threatened her. And so I started digging, not in the ground, but in the rule books, HOA charters, local statutes, property lines. I found something interesting. My ranch sits slightly outside the neighborhood boundary lines. I technically wasn't even required to follow most HOA rules. I'd been voluntarily cooperating all these years. I also found something else as long as my mailbox stood 6 in from the road shoulder and met USPS height standards. I could build it however I liked. So I did, but not right away. First, I paid a visit to my buddy Carl, who owns a welding shop just outside town. Think you can make me something strong? I asked him. He grinned. How strong? We talking strong enough to stop a Cadillac going 20 me peach? Carl raised an eyebrow. Steel thick, concrete base. Bury it deep. He nodded slowly. You want to paint it like wood? Oh yeah, I said. I want it to look like the old one, just stronger. It took 2 weeks to build reinforced steel post-concrete footing, 4F'd underground welded seams coated with faux wood grain, and a nice rustic mailbox on top. Looked harmless, but it wasn't. I installed it myself early one Sunday morning before the sun rose. Then I waited a week. Passed. Then too, Karen still drove by, still stared but didn't touch it. Until one Tuesday evening, around 6:30, I was out back feeding the horses when I heard the unmistakable sound of rubber screeching. Then bam, I dropped the bucket and ran toward the road. Her SUV was tilted sideways, the front bumper half hanging off. Smoke puffed from the hood, the mailbox barely scratched. Karen stepped out looking like she'd seen a ghost. She held her wrist like it hurt, and her face was a mask of disbelief. What is that thing made of? She screamed, eyes darting from the wrecked grill to the solid post that refused to budge. And that's when I saw something rich, her husband standing on their porch across the street. With his mouth wide open, I slowly walked toward the mailbox, arms crossed. It's a standard mailbox, I said, meets all postal regulations. She glared at me like she wanted to scream, but couldn't find the words. You did this on purpose, she yelled. No, Mum, I said with a shrug. You ran off the road again. Her face turned red, and she stomped back to her SUV, but when she tried to reverse, it wouldn't move. Her axle was busted that night. The tow truck came, so did the sheriff, and that's when the story really started to heat up, because as the officer took her statement and asked questions, Karen pointed at my mailbox and shouted, "It's a weapon, he rigged it to hurt me." And I just stood there holding the installation manual from the USPS website, smiling. As I said, I followed every rule you can check, but what none of us saw coming was what the sheriff found when he looked inside the Cadillac's glove box, and that's where everything started spiraling fast. Where are you all watching from? Let me know in the comments. And stay tuned for what the sheriff found in Chapter 2. Do you think Karen's war with me was just about the mailbox? Or was it something way deeper? Let me know your guesses, because it's about to get wilder. The sheriff flipped open the glove box of Karen's busted Cadillac, probably expecting registration and insurance. But instead a manila envelope slid out and hit the floorboard. He picked it up, opened it. Then his eyes narrowed. I stepped closer, trying to see what he was staring at. Karen didn't move. Her arms were crossed, tight, jaw clenched like she knew what was coming. "Ma'am," the sheriff said slowly, "do you want to explain what this is?" Karen stammered. "That's all, that's personal." But he held it up. It was a stack of printed photographs of my property, my barn, my mailbox, even my back porch, zoomed in, taken at different times of day. Some looked like they were snapped from behind bushes, others from a car window. The sheriff gave me a look. "You aware someone's been taking pictures of your house?" "No," I said, my heart starting to race, but that explains why. "I kept seeing flashes near the tree line last month." Karen lunged forward. "You can't just go through my things like that. This is a violation, Ma'am," he interrupted. "Why do you have these?" "They're for HOA documentation," she snapped. "We've had complaints." I was just gathering evidence. I shook my head. "Of what, me feeding my cows?" She turned toward me with a sneer. You think you're so clever with your little mailbox stunt, but you're not above the rules? The sheriff stepped between us. All right, let's calm this down, Karen. You're going to need to come by the station. We need a formal report. You may be liable for property damage, and there might be some questions about harassment. Karen's eyes went wide. Harassment. I'm the one being attacked. Look. At my car, he glanced at her bumper. That's not an attack. That's the result of reckless driving. The tow truck driver whistled as he hooked up her SUV. Whatever hit that mailbox didn't win. I wanted to laugh, but I held it in as Karen stood there fuming. Rich finally came down the porch steps. He walked past me without a word and stopped beside his wife. I told you this was going too far. He muttered, voice low but not quiet enough. Karen turned on him like a switch, flipped. You're taking his side. Now? I'm taking the sane side, he replied, rubbing his forehead. You've been obsessed with this mailbox for months. It's a box, Karen. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was stunned. Silent, that was rare. The sheriff nodded toward me. Jake, I'll be back. In touch. If you get any more trouble, let me know. I will. I said, eyes still locked on Karen. She glared at me as the tow truck pulled away, her Cadillac trailing behind like a wounded animal. And just like that, the road was quiet again. But something didn't sit right. The pictures, the envelope. Why would she need that many pictures of my property? I walked back to the house, thinking, maybe it was over, but it wasn't. The next morning, a new letter showed up on my porch, not in the mailbox. On the porch, no postage, no name, just a single sheet inside that read, "You won't win, we always protect our own." That same afternoon, I noticed tire tracks along the back fence. Not my truck, not the mailman. Someone had been on the property. I checked the security footage, nothing. Then I remembered Karen had cameras on every corner. Of her property, some pointed toward mine. That night, I decided to confront her once and for all, but when I got to the Prescott house, it was dark. Too dark, not a single light on, even the camera lights were off. I knocked, no answer. I waited still. Nothing, then a voice behind me. She's gone. I turned. It was Maggie Sims, one of the few neighbors I trusted. She lived 2 houses down and worked at the diner in town. Gone where I asked, took off this morning. Rich packed up her things and helped load them into the truck. I blinked. They moved out, no, just her. Maggie said he's staying, said she needed a mental break. I should have felt relief, but I didn't because Karen wasn't the type to give up. Sure enough, 2 nights later, I found my fence wires. Cut, cattle tracks heading toward the road. I spent the entire night rounding them up before someone called animal control. That's when I knew it wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. I started documenting everything, every tire track, every broken gate. I installed motion sensors, even upgraded the cameras. And then I noticed something odd. The HOA board wasn't responding to any of my emails, so I called Jim Sanders, an older man who'd served on the board before Karen took over. Jim has there. Been a board meeting this month? Nope, he said. Karen suspended them when she took office, said it wasn't efficient. I frowned. But the charter requires a monthly review. Jim sighed. You didn't hear it from me, but Karen made a lot of changes after. She got bullied most of us off the board. It's just her and her friend Paul now, and Paul, he rubber stamps everything. Is that even legal? Technically, no, but no one wants to fight her. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just being nosy. She was trying to run the entire neighborhood like her personal empire. And for some reason, my ranch was in her way. But why I got my answer a few days later when I ran into Rich at the hardware store. He looked tired, less polished than usual. Rich, I said, is she okay? He gave a small shrug. Depends on who you ask. What was all that really about my mailbox? He looked around. Lowered his voice. She wanted your land. I blinked. What, she's been working with a guy from Ridgeview. Development said if she could pressure you enough, you'd sell. They wanted to build luxury homes on your backlot, called it expanding the community. She even had sketches drawn up. My mouth went dry, and she didn't tell the board. There is no board, he said, with a bitter laugh. Just her, she thought. If she could make life hard enough, you'd cave. I stared at him. She really thought that would work. She's stubborn, but also dangerous. I went home in a daze. Now it all made sense. The complaints, the threats, the mailbox crashes. Karen wanted me off my own land, but she'd left behind something even more dangerous than her SUV, because that manila envelope the sheriff found, it wasn't the only one. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A deep voice on the other end said, "We need to talk about the footage Karen gave us," and that's where everything took another sharp turn, because someone else had picked up where she left off, and they weren't playing games anymore. I froze. The phone still pressed to my ear. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't need to know my name," the man replied calmly. "But Karen gave us footage, pictures, documents, everything tied to your ranch. She said you were difficult, a holdout for what there was." A pause. Then he said it, "Development." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm not selling." "I don't think you understand," he replied. "You don't have a choice. We've already got easements lined up from the other properties. Your land is the only missing piece." "You think I care about your easements?" I snapped. "This land's been in my family. 3 generations. You can't build a single brick here. You're in for a rough year if you think that he said you might. Want to read the fine print in your deed? There's always a loophole." Then the line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, heart thumping, mind racing. Who was this guy? And what footage was Karen handing out? I ran to my safe and grabbed the original. Indeed, everything looked normal, just like it always had, but his words stuck with me like splinters. Loophole. The next day I drove to the county records office. It was an hour away, and I waited in line behind folks paying taxes and transferring titles. When I finally got to the desk, I explained I needed to check the deed history on my land. The clerk, a young woman with red glasses and a southern drawl, typed in my parcel number and frowned. "You said Morrison Ranch, right? Yep, been in our name since 1963. Well, yes and no," she said. "Looks like in 1992 a supplemental clause was filed. It doesn't override your ownership, but it's an old agreement for potential future use under community development proposals." I leaned in. "What does that mean?" She clicked. Some more printed a few pages and slid them to me. Buried deep in the legal ease was a clause that said if the surrounding landowners agreed to a unified plan for development and the HOA approved, the Morrison Ranch could be subject to a buyout offer. It didn't force me to sell, but it gave others the legal ground to apply pressure, like zoning changes, access restrictions, and utility routes. And it was signed by my dad 30 years ago. Back then, the HOA was just a dusty neighborhood club, probably. Seemed harmless, but now it was a weapon in the wrong hands. I walked out of that building feeling like someone had yanked the earth out from under me. That evening I found a strange package on my doorstep. No label, no sender, just a black thumb. Drive inside, I plugged it into my old laptop. One I kept offline, and opened the only folder inside. It was titled Evidence. There were videos, tons of them, some from Karen's home cameras, others from what looked like a drone. Some dated back 6 months, all focused on my ranch. One video stood out. It showed me one morning walking outside in my boxers, carrying a feed bucket, swatting a wasp. It was embarrassing, but also creepy. Another showed me talking to Maggie at the fence line. Yet another had a timestamp matching the day I confronted Karen over the second mailbox. And then there was one more. This one was recent. I watched in silence as the footage revealed Karen meeting a man in a silver SUV. She handed him the same manila envelope the sheriff had found. He looked through it, nodded, and pointed toward my property. And then she gave him cash. I paused, the video heart pounding. This wasn't HOA business. This was personal. I picked up the phone and called the sheriff. He came by an hour later, reviewed the footage, and whistled. "Lo, Jake, this ain't normal. You sure you don't want to press charges on what she didn't actually do anything illegal yet? But if that guy's not a developer, if he's something worse." "Exactly." The sheriff leaned back. "You may want to lawyer up." I nodded, already in motion. He stood up to leave, but paused at the door. "Keep that mailbox, Jake. She might have hit it, but it's the one thing that's holding strong." I chuckled. Funny, never thought a mailbox would turn into a war, but it had. That week, I put up a no trespassing sign every 50 FT along my property. I installed new cameras, some hidden, some obvious. I had Carl build me a secondary gate for the backfield, just in case I didn't sleep well one night. I heard my horses going nuts. I ran out with a flashlight and found the latch to their pen had been loosened, not open, not broken, just enough so it would come undone on its own. After a few pushes, someone wanted to make it look like I was careless. I fixed the latch, checked the barn, and stayed up till sunrise. Maggie stopped by later that morning with a pie. "I thought you might need something sweet," she said, giving me a sad smile. "You look like hell." I chuckled. "Thanks, that obvious, huh?" She handed me the pie and said, "Rich came into the diner last night, looked nervous. Did he say anything?" She nodded, said he's been getting calls from people he doesn't know. One guy asked him if the ranch deal was still on. I blinked. So Karen isn't the only one behind. This seems like she stirred up a bigger pot than even she expected that night. I got a knock at my door. It was Rich. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "I need to talk," he said. "I think Karen made a deal with someone she shouldn't have, and now I think we're both in danger." He stepped inside, and that's when he told me something that nearly knocked the wind out of me. "She forged a document," he said, voice low. "Something that looks like your signature. She planned to submit it with the rest of the HOA papers, as if you'd agreed to sell. It hasn't been filed yet, but she gave it to a man named Gil Camden." I froze. That name I knew. Gil Camden was notorious in Texas for dirty land flips. He bought up struggling neighborhoods, bullied people out of their homes, and turned profits before the dust even settled. People whispered his name like a ghost, and he had my fake signature. "Rich," I said, slowly, "if that paper gets filed, they'll tie me up in court for months." "I know," he said, "that's why I came. I can testify. I saw her hand it over. I can swear it's not real." I nodded. "I need that from you on record." "I'll do it," he said. "She's gone too far." But just then the power went out. Everything went dark. We looked at each other, and then crash. A rock shattered the front window. I hit the floor. Rich ducked beside me. I crawled to the corner and grabbed the shotgun by the door. Heart racing. Another crash, this time from the back. The porch lights flickered once, then died. And then I saw them, 3 figures in dark clothes approaching through the fields. No flashlights, no sound, just slow, steady movement, like they knew the layout already. I whispered to Rich, going, "Get upstairs now." Because whoever they were, they weren't here to talk. They were here to finish what Karen started. Rich bolted up the stairs as I slid behind the couch, shotgun cocked and breath held. The figures moved like shadows fanning out across the yard. One came toward the broken window, another circled around the side. The third lingered at the porch, crouched low like they were testing for alarms. They were pros. Whoever sent them didn't want a conversation, they wanted a message sent, but they'd made one mistake. They'd picked the wrong ranch. My granddad built this house like a fortress, thick oak, doors, reinforced windows, and a crawlspace tunnel out back that only my dad and I knew about. I hadn't thought about it in years. Until now, I crept toward the back hallway and flipped the hidden panel near the pantry. It clicked softly. The narrow hatch opened into the old crawlspace path that ran beneath the house and out to the stable. I hissed upstairs. "Rich!" He appeared at the landing, holding a lamp like a weapon.
I motioned for him to come down in here, I whispered. Now we ducked inside just as the front door groaned under pressure. Someone was pushing hard. I slid the hatch shut behind us and crawled fast, Rich grumbling behind me. "Where does this go?" he whispered. "Stable, are we safe?" "Nope." We emerged behind the feed troughs, the smell of hay and horses thick in the air. I quickly pulled a tarp over the exit hatch, then guided Rich through the side stall door. "Keep your head down," I muttered. The wind howled.
Outside, as we crouched behind the barn wall, from here I could see the porch. The men had forced the door open. One slipped inside, while the other two stood watch. They hadn't seen us yet. I turned to Rich. "I'm going to scare them off. You call the sheriff." "My phone's dead," he whispered. "Of course it is." I handed him mind speed. "Dial number 1. He ducked behind a hay bale and made the call. I didn't wait. I ran toward the motion light I'd set up earlier. Behind the shed, hit the remote switch in. My pocket and the whole back field lit up like a football stadium. The men froze. Then I fired. Boom. The shotgun blast wasn't aimed at them, just the sky, but it echoed loud enough to shake the trees. "Get off my land," I shouted. "Next one's not a
warning."
They ran. The two on the porch bolted down the steps. The third stumbled coming out of the house, panic on his face. One of them dropped. Something looked like a crowbar. They didn't stop to retrieve it. They sprinted into the tree-line and disappeared. The silence that followed felt like thunder. I stood there shaking, adrenaline running wild. A minute later, Rich reappeared. Phone in hand. "Sheriff's?" "On the way, he's bringing backup." When the deputies arrived, they swept the property with flashlights and rifles. The front door was damaged, my window shattered, and furniture tossed around, but nothing stolen. It wasn't a robbery, it was a warning. We gave the sheriff the story, the footage from my cameras, and the name Gil Camden. He took notes, jaw clenched. We've had trouble with him before, always. Skirts just outside the law. Never enough proof to stick. Well, I said he just escalated to breaking and entering. The sheriff nodded. "I'll open an investigation, but you need to watch your back. If Karen gave him that forged signature, he might think it's his golden ticket." I looked around at the chaos he'll find. This land isn't for sale, not now, not ever. The next morning I boarded up the window, cleaned the mess, and changed every lock in the house. Rich offered to stay, but I told him to go home. He'd done enough. Maggie brought over breakfast and hugged me hard. "You all right?" "I will be." Then she whispered, "You're going to fight this, right? You're not going to let them win. Not a chance." I drove into town and met with a lawyer named Morgan Harlow, tough, smart, and known for never backing down. I handed her every document I had: the deed, the clause, the drone footage, and the copy of the video showing Karen handing off. The forged papers, she studied them with sharp eyes. "This is more than a land dispute. This is criminal conspiracy. You think we can stop it?" She smiled. "Not just stop it, we're going to bury it by the end of the week." She had filed an injunction. Freeze any development plans tied to my property. She also sent a cease and desist to Ridge View. Development with a threat of legal action. I thought that might slow things down, but it did the opposite. I started getting strange calls, blocked numbers, static hang-ups. One day, My mailbox was wide open, every letter torn to shreds and scattered like confetti. No damage to the post, no fingerprints, just a silent reminder. Another day, my cattle feed delivery was delayed, and when it came, the bags had been slid open and resealed like someone had tampered with them. These people weren't just rich, they were relentless, but I wasn't alone anymore. Rich surprisingly stood by me. He testified in a statement that Karen had planned the forgery, that she'd said I was just one man in the way of progress. And Maggie, she showed up every morning with coffee and updates from the diner. Rumors spread fast. In small towns, people started whispering about Camden, about Karen, about my land. Suddenly neighbors I hadn't heard from in years were dropping by. Need help fixing that fence? You good on supplies? I got an old trail cam you can borrow. The ranch community was rallying. Still, I knew something big was coming. And then it did. One afternoon, I got a call from Morgan. Her voice was tight. Jake Camden just filed an emergency motion in court. He claims you're in breach of a community development agreement. He's trying to get a court order to seize the land temporarily while the case is sorted out. What he's pushing fast. And if a judge sides with him, they could bulldoze your ranch before we even get a hearing. I felt the blood drain from my face. How long do we have? 3 days, 3 days. To prove I owned the land, to stop a forged document to protect everything my family had built that night. I walked the property line with a flashlight, thinking about my granddad's hands, building this fence post by post, my father raising horses here, the childhood memories, the quiet sunsets, the freedom. I wasn't going down easy, but just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I found a man standing in my barn, not hiding, not sneaking, just standing there wearing a dark coat, hands in his pockets, like he was waiting. And when I raised my shotgun and asked,
"Who the hell are you?" he smiled. "Mr. Morrison," he said calmly. "My name is Gil Camden, and I think we need to talk."
I didn't lower the shotgun, Gil. Camden didn't flinch. He just stood there like he owned the air in the barn, casually brushing a speck of dust off his sleeve, as if we were meeting for tea, not during a property war. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said. "Oh, I think we do," he replied, stepping forward slowly. "You see, Jake, can I call you Jake? You're standing in the way of something big, something inevitable." I tightened my grip. "Try stepping 1 more inch and see how inevitable this buckshot feels." He smirked. No need for theatrics. "I didn't come to fight. I came to offer a deal. I've seen what your deals look like." "I'm sure you have," he said smoothly. "But this one might interest you. It's clean, it's legal, and it saves you a year's worth of court stress." I didn't say a word. He reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a thick folder, sealed and bound with ribbon like some kind of VIP invitation. He placed it gently on the hay bale beside him. "This is an offer $2, $7 million cash, no taxes. You walk away, we bulldoze the place, build something beautiful, and you move anywhere you want. Caribbean Montana doesn't matter." I stared at the folder like it was radioactive. "I'm not selling," I said. "Don't be a fool," Gil said. "Do you know what this place will look like in 6 months? Dirt foundations, pools, driveways, HOA parks with fancy little dog stations. Exactly why I'm not selling," I growled. "This isn't a golf course, it's my family's home." He took a long breath, then reached into his coat again and pulled out something else, a photograph. It was printed from a security cam. Still Karen, talking to Gil, handing him the envelope, same one from my thumb drive, but now he was using it as a threat. "You keep pushing this, and I file a lawsuit saying you leaked private HOA footage violated a non-disclosure clause, and endangered a woman's mental health, Karen's, in treatment. By the way, you'll look like a bully, and me, I'll look like the victim. You're bluffing, I said. I never bluff, he said coldly. Asked the 5 other ranchers. I've turned into tennis courts. I stepped closer now, toe-to-toe with him. Let me tell you something. Gil, I faced down coyotes, wild boars, and floods that would drown a mountain I'm not scared of.
He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled again. I gave you a chance, he said quietly. Remember that. And just like that, he turned and walked out of the barn like nothing had happened. I stood there breathing hard, my finger still hovering.
Over the trigger, I should have stopped him, but something told me this wasn't over. Not yet. Later that night, I called Morgan and told her everything. We'll file an emergency injunction, she said. That was an illegal threat. We have video proof from your barn cameras, right? I blinked. Yes, I ran to my laptop, opened the barn, camera feed static. All the footage from the last 24 hours gone. He must have jammed or cut the feed when he entered. My stomach turned. Morgan, I said, slowly, we don't
have anything. Then we need a witness. I hung up and called Rich. He came over in 10 minutes flat, looking pale, but determined. I'll go on record. He said, I know what Karen did. I saw it. And I saw that man too. Once met him at our house. I can testify. He was working with her.
The next day, Morgan submitted an affidavit with Rich's statement, plus a stack of backup evidence, HOA emails Karen sent, drone footage, and the forged signature documentation. Camden fired back, filed a new motion to freeze my assets. Classic bully tactic. Morgan told me they want to wear you down, but I didn't bend. Instead, I doubled down. I called the local news. I told my story. They came out with cameras, did an interview in front of the mailbox Karen once flattened. I showed them the damage, the letters, the thumb drive, even the newspaper from the last attack, with headlines that read, Local rancher faces mysterious attacks after HOA dispute. That story blew up. People from all over the county started calling strangers, offering support, lawyers, volunteering time. A GoFundMe was started by some neighbors, teenager, to help cover legal fees. It hit $10,000 in 2 days. Karen might have gone quiet, but the community had found its voice, and Camden, he didn't like that. 2 nights later, my generator was ripped out of the ground, not stolen, just destroyed wires, cut bolts, loosened. Every single light on my land went dark for hours. I sat on my porch with a lantern and the shotgun across my lap. Then I heard it, a whisper, someone moving through the brush. I flipped on my handheld spotlight, nothing. Then a whistle, 3 short bursts from somewhere near the west field. A signal. I raised the light and saw movement just for a second. Then I heard hoofbeat hats, fast, coming closer. One of my horses, no too heavy, and then it hit me. They were sending someone. I called Morgan. Then I called the sheriff, but before they could get there, the fire started. It began at the edge of the barn. A small spark, probably gasoline-fed flames, jumped fast, licking the wooden beams and climbing toward the roof. Like fingers, I ran with the
extinguisher. Rich close behind me. Maggie showed up too, screaming. I saw smoke.
We worked like madmen, throwing sand, spraying water, shoveling dirt, anything to slow it down. It wasn't until the fire department arrived that the flames were finally beaten back by morning. The barn was still standing, barely singed, scorched, but
alive like me. And as I sat on the dirt watching the smoke curl into the sky, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't about a mailbox anymore. It was war. And it was time I took the fight straight to them, because in the ashes of that fire, I found something.
The arsonist didn't mean to leave behind a silver cufflink stamped with the initials GC, and suddenly I had my smoking gun. I held the cufflink in my hand like it was made of gold, silver-plated, stamped with GC Gil Camden's initials, a mark of vanity. And now a critical mistake. The fire had nearly taken my barn. But this tiny piece of metal, it gave me something more valuable than the entire ranch proof. Morgan drove out to the ranch the next morning as the sun crept over the haze of smoke that still lingered. Her face was tight with focus as I placed the cufflink into a Ziploc bag and handed it over. "We'll get it tested," she said. "Prince residue, whatever we can find, this ties him to the fire, and that changes everything we're talking. Criminal charges." Now I looked over my shoulder at the blackened side of my barn. "He's not going to stop." "No," she said, "but now we can fight him on every level." Rich, who'd stayed the night in the guest room with his shotgun on his lap, stepped outside and joined us. "What's next?" he asked. Morgan gave him a tired smile. "We file criminal charges for arson and attempted destruction of property. Then we launch a motion to subpoena Ridgeview's communications. If Camden coordinated any of this through his company, we'll find it. And if Karen's still working with him behind the scenes, she's going down too." It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not. Yet because I knew Camden, men like him don't stop. Because the law says so, they stop. When there's no money left to be made, or when people make too much noise, so I made more noise. I called the local paper and invited them back. Then I called the
regional station out of Austin. I gave them the whole story. This time, holding the cufflink in my palm like a trophy, reporters ate it up. They titled the segment "Mailbox to Mayhem," how one rancher stood his ground against a mega developer. The story
spread like wildfire, even online. Reddit, Facebook, local forums. People shared my pictures, my videos, my interviews. I was suddenly the face of rural resistance, but with every headline, every article, every new supporter, Camden got angrier. The sheriff dropped by again 3 days later. He brought an evidence report. "Your guy," he said, holding up the plastic evidence sleeve, "left more than his jewelry. There's gasoline residue on the cufflink, and tire tracks near the barn match a vehicle registered to Ridgeview Security Fleet." It was enough. An arrest warrant was issued for Gil Camden. But he didn't get arrested. He disappeared, vanished from his penthouse in Dallas. Phone disconnected, no show at his court, summons his lawyers claimed business. Emergency overseas, and Karen, oh, she reappeared. Right after the warrant dropped, I saw her walking through the HOA park like nothing had happened, wearing sunglasses, holding a clipboard, still acting like Queen of the Kingdom. She didn't even look my way, but the whispers started. Neighbors stopped answering her calls. People she once barked orders at were now keeping their distance. I thought that might finally be the end, until I received a letter in the mail that changed everything. It wasn't typed, it wasn't signed. It was handwritten in careful loops and clean lines inside. It simply said, "I know where the other signature is. Meet me at the storage unit behind Ridgeview Plaza 8 LP.
Friday. Come alone, bring no phones." I showed it to Morgan. "This could be a trap," she said, "or it could be the thing that blows this whole operation wide open." We argued. She insisted I let the sheriff go in my place, but something told me this wasn't.
For Lawman, this was personal. So I parked a block away and walked under the flickering lot lights toward the back of Ridgeview Plaza. The storage units were lined like tombs, old aluminum doors, padlocked tight. The one mentioned in the note had its lock open hanging. I pushed the door up. Slowly, the metal squealing inside was nothing but a folding chair, and sitting in it, Paul, Karen's lap dog board member, the man who rubber-stamped everything. He looked tired, nervous, like he hadn't Slept in week. You came, he said, quietly. What is this? I asked. He handed me a folder, inside scanned copies of HOA forms, emails between Karen and Camden. One sheet stood out, a notarized page with my forged signature. The original is still with Camden, but I made copies. When I saw what she was doing, I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted my landscaping paid for, not to be involved in arson and forgery. I looked at him. Why now? She said you'd give up, that you were a stubborn farmer with
no resources, but you didn't. You made it public loud, and now everyone's talking. He stood up. I'm giving you everything. Do what you want with it. I'm done. And just like that, he walked off into the night. I called Morgan the next morning. She nearly
dropped the phone. This is enough to file federal charges, she whispered. Mail fraud, land forgery, racketeering. It's all here within 48 hours. The case had a whole new weight behind it. The county DA got involved, then the Texas state attorney. General's office. By the end of the week, a task force had issued search warrants for Ridgeview offices, Karen's house, and Camden's last known address. And that's when it happened. The extreme moment that turned this battle into something much, much bigger. The court ruled in my favor. The emergency motion to seize my land dismissed, Karen's entire HOA authority revoked, and the judge ordered a full audit of Ridgeview's ties to HOA boards across 5 counties. I stood in that courtroom cowboy, boots tapping against the tile, listening to the judge slam the gavel. It was the sound of everything shifting. I walked out into the sun, and for the first time in months, I felt safe until I got back to the ranch and saw the black SUV waiting near my gate. A man stood outside it, not Camden, not Karen, someone I didn't recognize, and as I stepped closer, he turned around and said, Mr. Morrison, we represent a national firm that recently acquired Ridgeview's remaining assets. There's something in the files we think you'll want to see. Now, he held up a tablet, and the screen showed a satellite image of my ranch, but what was beneath it, what the scans revealed, it wasn't just dirt, it was something else entirely. And suddenly I realized this war was far from over. I stared at the tablet, screened the glowing satellite image flickering in the fading Texas sunlight beneath my ranch. My family's land was something I had never expected. The man standing in front of me tapped the screen. This is a thermal scan from Ridgeview's geological survey archives. Camden commissioned it 3 years ago without disclosure. See these dark red clusters? He zoomed in. Crude oil. My chest tightened. Oil, possibly. A lot of it, he said. Your land sits atop an untapped pocket. It's why Camden was so desperate. He wasn't just after development, he was after what's underneath. I stepped back, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway all this time, the mailbox harassment, the forged papers, the fire. It wasn't just about building tennis courts and luxury homes. It was about millions, maybe more. And suddenly it all made sense. Karen wasn't power. Hungry for the sake of control, she was covering for a far bigger play. Camden wasn't just a greedy developer, he was playing chess with black gold, and I had, unknowingly, been standing on the board as the final piece they needed. The man continued. Our firm recently acquired Ridgeview's assets during liquidation. In reviewing files for outstanding liabilities, we found this Camden kept it hidden even for most of
his own board, but now it's all discoverable.
What do you want from me? I asked. He looked me dead in the eye. To partner? I laughed. He didn't, Mr. Morrison, he said calmly. This isn't a scam. You're sitting on land that could change your life. We're prepared to offer full rights, sharing with
you as the majority stakeholder. We'll front the equipment, the labor, the legal. You keep the land. We just drill and split. And if I say no, he smiled faintly, then it'll stay buried. But believe me, others won't stop trying. Not now. I didn't answer him.
Instead, I took the tablet, told him to wait, and went inside. Rich and Maggie were in the kitchen drinking coffee. I slammed the tablet down on the table and watched their eyes widen oil. Maggie whispered, "No wonder they came at you like that, Rich," muttered for a moment. The silence between us said everything, and then I spoke. "I'm not selling, but I'm not stupid either." I called Morgan within hours. She had 3 independent surveyors lined up. If there was oil, we'd verify it ourselves without. Camden's crooked blueprint the next few weeks passed in a blur. The surveyors confirmed it, a deep, stable pocket, rich unclaimed, and sitting squarely beneath my ranch. It was worth 8 figures, maybe more, depending on depth and quality news, spread fast. But this time I controlled the story. We went public with our version, not about a rancher under attack, but a rancher who fought back and uncovered the truth. I rejected every major oil conglomerate that came knocking. Instead, I partnered with a regional energy cooperative, negotiated with Morgan's help, and ensured environmental protections and community benefit clauses. A portion of every barrel's revenue would go toward local rancher funds, veteran support, and rebuilding the scorched areas around the barn. Karen, she was indicted, fraud, conspiracy, misuse of HOA funds, and obstruction. When the feds raided her second home in Arkansas, they found more than fake paperwork. They found evidence of other ranches she helped sabotage across 3 counties. Camden's still missing. Rumors say he fled to Mexico, some say South America. No one's seen him since. But me, I stayed. I rebuilt the barn, upgraded the mailbox again, this time with a small bronze plaque that reads, "Come and take it." Neighbors stop by often. Now they wave, bring pie, ask for advice. HOA, elections are fair. Now Maggie's the new president. First order of business, she dissolved 90% of the unnecessary rules and held a barbecue to celebrate. Rich started volunteering at the local school. Even the sheriff comes around just to chat. And every time I look out at the land, sunrise grazing the hills, horses trotting past the rebuilt fence, I remember what nearly happened, all because someone thought I'd be too stubborn to fight back. Turns out they were right, but what they didn't count on was that I wouldn't be fighting alone. So if you're watching from a city apartment, a ranch, or a porch swing somewhere in Idaho, let me tell you something loud and clear. Never underestimate the power of a good fence, a strong mailbox, and a community that refuses to be bullied. Because when Karen ran over my ranch mailbox, she didn't see the war she was starting, and she sure didn't see how it would end, not with a lawsuit, not with a bribe, but with a legacy still standing, still mine, still unshaken.